All right. If you were with us last week, we talked about how Jesus ate with Matthew and the sinners. And the Pharisees didn't like that at all. Obviously, this guy can't really be from God if he's eating with those kinds of people. And so Jesus tells us, he says he didn't come to spend time with healthy people. He came to be the doctor for the sick. And that's really good news for you and for me. So notice here in Matthew chapter 9, the questioning of Jesus continues. Let's look at the next story. We'll pick up in verse 14. It says, Then John's disciples came and asked him, How is it that we and the Pharisees fast often, but you and your disciples do not fast? Jesus answered, How can the guests of the bridegroom mourn while he is with them? The time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them. Then they will fast. No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch will pull away from the garment, making the tear worse. Neither do people pour new wine into old wineskins. If they do, the skins will burst, the wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins, and both are preserved. Okay, so in this one passage, we've got three different images that Jesus uses. He talks about weddings, he talks about cloth patches, and he talks about wineskins. And I think with all of these images, they're things that are pretty strange to us. No one in our world would use those kinds of images, but I think there's two basic things that Jesus is trying to teach us in this passage. Okay, number one, there are different times for different things, and with Jesus, it's time to celebrate. And you think about like Ecclesiastes chapter 3, there's a time to be born, a time to die, a time to live, a time to mourn, a time to cry, all of those kinds of things. There's different times for different things, but Jesus is here, and that means it's time to celebrate. All right, and again, the question that prompts all of this is okay, Jesus, why don't your disciples fast like the Pharisees' disciples do and like John's disciples do? Okay, which is a good question. All the different religious groups in Judea fasted. They fasted regularly. So why is it that Jesus and his disciples don't fast? All right, and if you remember from your Old Testament studies, in Judaism, there is one day a year when all the people fasted, the Day of Atonement. All right, that's when you fast, you remember your sins, you mourn over your sins, you pray to God asking for his forgiveness and for his mercy. And that fast day was a somber day, it was a reflective day, it was a day of Sabbath and rest. And over the centuries, like by the time Jesus comes around, there were several other fasts that people regularly kept. They'd just grown up over the ages. You fasted to remember the destruction of the temple. There was a day of fasting to remember the exile. People prayed and fasted. They asked God to end their suffering and bring about his new kingdom of God. And the thing about all the fasts, all of them were somber occasions. Okay, and when you're Jewish, there's a lot of tragedy in our history to remember. And so you fast to remember those hard days. And if you wanted to be really holy, like the Pharisees, you fasted twice a week. Because, obviously, if a little fasting is good, a whole lot of fasting must be much better. Also, if you're a Pharisee, when you fasted, when you mourned, you let everybody know just how deeply you were fasting and mourning. Right? Because, again, what's the point of being holy if I can't show everybody around me how holy I am? Especially how much holier I am than you are. And Jesus already addressed that part of things in the Sermon on the Mount. Or remember that he says, when you fast, don't do it like the Pharisees, like the hypocrites. Okay, when we fast, we do it with a heart for God, not showing everybody how holy we are. Okay. Also, while the Jews regularly practiced fasting, that was only half of it. Okay, they also regularly practiced feasting. Okay, when we celebrate the Passover, we feast. When we celebrate the harvest, we feast. When we remember turning home from captivity, we feast. And so God gave his people a specific calendar, and he said there will be times in your life where you feast, there will be times in your life where you fast. There are days that are set aside for somber reflection and mourning, and there are days that are set aside for joyous celebration. Okay, if you are a Jew living in the first century, you do both because you need both. So, the Pharisees fasted twice a week. The disciples of John fasted regularly. But they look at Jesus' disciples and they say, why aren't you fasting right now with the rest of us? And to answer, Jesus says, you can't combine a wedding and a funeral. Okay, there's a time for celebrating, like a wedding, and there's a time for mourning, like a funeral. Okay, you wear white to a wedding, you wear black to a funeral. Again, there's the joke you can put in there about how grooms wear black to funerals or to their own wedding, but I'm smart enough not to make that joke. All right, one occasion, it's a time to eat and drink and be merry. And the other occasion, it is a time for somber reflection. You cannot combine a wedding and a funeral. Now, in our last story, the one we read last week, Jesus was having a party with a bunch of sinners. So what time does Jesus think that it is? Okay, it's fasting time or feasting time? No, it's feasting time. It is celebration time because the kingdom of God is finally here in Jesus. Okay, there's a time for fasting, even in the kingdom of God, and we'll come to that later. Jesus says there will be a time for fasting, but Jesus is here. If the Spirit of God is walking among us in bodily form, it is not time to fast, it is time to party. Now, we know in some Christian traditions, they follow a regular calendar. Today, even, they have regular days of feasting, regular days of fasting, and we don't do a whole lot of that in our tradition. Okay, but I think there is a great value in setting aside time to do both of those things, to both feast and to fast. Okay, I think we are wired for it as much as God's people needed it in the Old Testament, we need it in the New. In fact, last year on the Friday before Easter, we fasted as a church. Okay, then on Easter Sunday, we celebrated. Right now, I know that we have a lot of people going through some very different experiences as we're all trying to deal with lockdown and what we're doing. So I'm not going to propose that we have a day of fasting this year. Okay, but I do want us to think about how do we make next Sunday, Easter Sunday, a special day that we can celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. Okay, if ever there's a time worth celebrating, if ever there's an occasion worth celebrating, it's the resurrection of Jesus. All right, so that's number one. First thing Jesus is trying to tell him is that there's a time to fast and there's a time to celebrate. And since he is here, since he's bringing in the kingdom, it's time to celebrate. Okay, number two. Jesus says there's a time for the old and a time for the new. So this week I tried to think, what's the oldest man-made thing that I own? And I think it's this coin. I don't know how well you can see that from home. It's in a little plastic case because it's very old. But this coin, it is a half cent. It was minted in Philadelphia in 1806. And you can't see very well. It's got the Liberty's bust on the front, and it says half cent on the back and United States of America around on the back of it. Just in case you're curious, I looked this up on eBay this week, and it's worth somewhere around $40, something like that. And I got that when I was a kid. Whenever I was about 11 to 14, I really liked to collect coins. That was my hobby. And as anyone who's ever collected coins know, the older, the better. And the longer the time goes on, the older that coin gets, the more valuable it will be, right? Old is both good and desirable. Okay, but sometimes old is not better, right? Sometimes old things need replacing. I was thinking of something else I own that's pretty old. This is my grandfather's old King James Bible. I inherited this after he passed, and as I was looking through it, I found there's several notes in here from when he was studying the Bible. In the back, he's got an outline that he put together of the book of Philippians. It's still here in his handwriting, and it's a very old Bible that he used for many, many years. Now, was that a good Bible? Okay, absolutely. But do I study from it? No. Why? Okay, I don't use it because newer translations are more accurate. They're much easier to read. They're just better for my personal study. Okay, I think this old thing served its purpose. In fact, the King James Version served its purpose for centuries. But it's time for the new. Okay, now Jesus uses two illustrations here in Matthew chapter 9 that both get at this second point. Okay, if you put a new patch on an old coat, what will it do? Well, it'll shrink and it'll tear. Okay, what happens when you put new wine into old wineskins? Well, the new wine will expand and it breaks the old brittle skins. Okay, so there is a time for the old and there's a time for the new. So why does Jesus say that? Well, remember, the Jews had lived for so long in an age in which they were anticipating the kingdom that their comfort with the way that things had been for a long, long time, their comfort with the old, prevented many of them from experiencing the new age and the new work that God was doing in Jesus. And consequently, many people missed the new because they were stuck in the old. And by Jesus saying these things about clothes and wineskins, he's declaring that he is the new, right? The new day has dawned. He is the light. Many of the old ways will be left behind, and they're not going to be left behind because they were bad, right? There was nothing wrong with them, but they served their time. They served their purpose. There was a time for the old, but now it is a time for the new work that Jesus is doing. And so, as we think about what this means for us, okay, I am pretty confident that most of us want to be a part of Jesus' new world, right? Most of us have no desire to practice an old school Judaism. Most of us don't want to do anything with animal sacrifices or kosher diets or any of those kinds of things, right? Okay, I want to be a part of the new light of Jesus that is dawning. I want to be a kingdom person. Okay, and within this, and we've talked about this a bunch of times before, but we remember there's a bunch of things that will never change. Okay, the Bible itself never changes. The death, burial, resurrection, that gospel story of Jesus never changes. The mission of the church to seek and save the lost will never change. Okay, the fruits of the Spirit will never change. Love, joy, peace, that's never going to go out of style. Okay, but the continuing work of God in the lives of people around us is constantly changing. Okay, it is new every morning, right? And I don't want to miss it by holding on to the old. Okay, and I think if we're not careful, we can make that same mistake the Pharisees did, the same mistake lots of the Jewish people did, and miss out on what God is doing. Okay, by clinging to something old, we can miss that new wine. Okay, and I think we do this for lots of reasons. Okay, but if we believe that God is still at work in the world, okay, and if we believe that we are still supposed to be a people on mission, okay, and if we believe that the gospel really is timeless and is for all people, and if we believe the Spirit is with us, okay, then I don't want to have a Pharisee kind of attitude that misses out on the new things God is continuing to do around us. Okay, does that all make sense? I'm just going to assume that all of you are nodding because I can't see any of you at all. All right. So, 4 things that might make us miss out on what God is doing around us. If you're the kind of person that takes notes, these are the kinds of things that you might want to write down. 4 things that might make us miss what God is doing around us is we believe he is still at work in the world today. Okay, number 1, we reject the uncomfortable. Okay, we reject the uncomfortable. So something that I should probably buy pretty soon is a new pair of tennis shoes. In fact, I'll show you these because we're all just being comfortable, right? But I'll show you my shoe. Okay, the stitching is starting to wear out on the front. You can see on the sides it's starting to fray. The laces are starting to fray. The plastic that holds the heel in place like it's supposed to is broken in there. So there's like a piece of wobbly plastic in there. And I really should just replace my shoes. Okay, but why am I hesitant to go and buy a new pair of shoes? Okay, because these are comfortable. They're broken in just right. I've had them for so long, they're now molded to the specifics of my feet in a way that I don't care how good of a new pair of sneakers I would buy, they would never fit me as well as these shoes fit me right now. These shoes are comfortable, and so I'm hesitant to move on from them. Right, and I think this goes with what we talked about last week with Jesus caring for the sick. Okay, I think all too often we miss out on being a bigger part of God's work because I make my comfort a bigger priority than I make my discipleship. We reject being uncomfortable. You know, as we think about where we are right now today with coronavirus going on all around us, I think we have some incredible opportunities to serve people around us if we're willing to be uncomfortable. Okay, think of specific ways. How can you serve your neighbors at this time? What are ways that you can risk your own comfort in order to serve other people? Now, kind of the flip side of that, I think we also have some incredible opportunities right now to let people serve us. Okay, I've had a couple conversations with a couple of you recently about how some of you need to let some of the younger people do things like cut your grass and go and get groceries for you and do things for you that you want to be doing for yourself, but you won't let younger people serve you right now because it makes you uncomfortable. Again, I don't know exactly what this will look like for you in your situation, but I do know we cannot chase comfort and continually to chase the new works that God is doing at the same time. We're either fully on the discipleship boat with God or we're trying to do what we want to do. All right, number 2. Second reason we might miss the new things that God is doing in the world is that we reject the unfamiliar. Okay, we reject the unfamiliar. I've always been a big fan of coffee. I drink coffee all day, every day, and I certainly don't want to have to do any adulting until I've had my coffee first. Well, a few years ago, my wife Rachel, she said that she wanted us to replace our Mr. Coffee coffee pot with a Keurig coffee brewing machine. Okay, and that way, if she did that, she could make her morning decaf light roast that she further makes not coffee by putting cream into it. And then I could have my own pods or my own kind of coffee, and I could make it the way the Lord intended it, which is caffeinated, bold, and black. So she wanted to bring this new Keurig into our kitchen, and I was against it. Why? Okay, I was familiar with the traditional way of making coffee, right? You get the filter, the pot, you grind beans, you pour it in, all those kinds of things. And I was rejecting the unfamiliar. Okay, it turns out we did it her way anyway, and it was much better. I should have done it a lot sooner, but why didn't I? Okay, because I think all of us have an inclination. We reject the unfamiliar. One of the biggest reasons that people rejected Jesus is because they had gotten used to one way of living life, and following Jesus would take them into unfamiliar territory. Okay, Jesus changes things. You cannot follow Jesus and stay the same. For us, I think most of us, we deal with certain sins, certain pet sins, far longer than we have to, because even though we know it's bad for us, it's what we know. It's comfortable. People will stick in terrible relationships, or they'll keep working awful jobs, or they'll keep doing business with bad companies long past the time when we should quit. Why? Okay, because changing would be uncomfortable. We tend to stick with what we know. Now, currently, all of us have been forced into some unfamiliar territory, right? And a lot of it's bad. A lot of it's stuff that we would change tomorrow if we could. Okay, but God is getting some good things out of it too, right? And I hope we don't miss out on the good things that God is doing because we are so inclined to reject anything unfamiliar. That makes sense? That work? All right, number 3. Third reason we might miss what God is doing in the world is that we make it about us. Okay, we make it about us. All right, so this is week 3 of me preaching from my office instead of live and in our auditorium. And as my wife could tell you, I whined about it like a little kid saying, I don't want to. Okay? This is not the way I would want to do this at all, right? I can't get feedback from you during my sermons, right? I don't know if you're laughing at my jokes or not. I just assume you are because I know I'm that funny. I wonder also how I will look on a camera as I'm sitting down here, right? And so what do I wear and how is this going to make me look? And should I dress up or should I dress down, right? Make sure that I have good, smart looking books on the shelves behind me so that I look smart. And what will happen if people are watching who don't know me and we have visitors and they don't know what I'm normally like, and how is this all going to reflect on me? And turns out I shouldn't have worried because I'm just as handsome on camera as I am in person. Okay. But a lot of the things that were running through my mind as I was thinking about all of this is, how does all of this affect me? Okay. I was making this about me. Okay. But guess what? This is not about me. Okay, but my temptation in most everything I do in life is I make it about me. Fundamentally, people missed Jesus in his day because they were more concerned with what they were doing than they were concerned with what he was doing. Right? You think about the Pharisees. They made all of their religion about themselves instead of actually serving God. Many of the regular people in Jesus' day wouldn't follow him, not because of Jesus, but because they thought, well, what will my family think of me? What will my friends at the synagogue think about me? Right? How does all of this, how does the inbreaking of the kingdom of God into the world affect me? I think more than comfort, more than familiarity, I think we can miss what God is doing in the world because we make it all about us. Okay, but that's never been what God is about, right? You think about the Bible as a whole. The Bible is not a story about how I can go to heaven when I die, right? It's not a story about me. The Bible is a story about how God created the world, sin messed it up, and now God is in the process of redeeming it. I get to be a part of God's story, but this has never been a story about me. When we take it and we start with God and we think, how do I fit my life into that? It works. If I think this is about me, now how do I fit God into that? That's not it. Back several years ago, when my wife and I were living in Abilene before we ever had kids, I was talking to an elder at one of the larger churches there in town, and this church was going through a pretty big transition. And he said that several people left their church, and they always would meet with people when they left. And most of the people told the elders at this church that they didn't have any kind of a theological problem with the new direction the church was going, but they didn't want to have to go home and tell their families that they were going to a church that was doing these new things. And I've thought about that story a lot. And I've thought about how many people will choose a church based more on how it makes them look than whether or not that church is effectively carrying out the mission of God. I think anytime we are thinking more about how this affects us than we are thinking about how we can be a part of God's story, I think we're doing it wrong. We start with God and we add us, not the other way around. All right, number 4. Fourth reason we might miss what God is doing is that we focus on what we will lose rather than what we gain. And you think about this. This is our story last week, right? Matthew had to give up his tax booth to follow Jesus. Okay, he had lost his job, but he gained the kingdom of God. And you think about when Christians in the English-speaking world moved away from using the King James Version, okay, we lost a common text, right? There were advantages to everybody having the exact same Bible, but what we gained was clarity and understanding and new expressions that actually make sense to people in a modern world. What we have lost here recently is the ability to send our kids to school, right? The ability to have a few minutes of quiet in our day. Okay, but what we've gained is a measure of health and safety for everyone. Okay, if we focus on what we'll lose instead of what we will gain, we can easily miss out on what God is doing in the world today. It is always better for us to be a part of what God is doing rather than to hold on to things chasing our own selves. All right, so final thought. That is, what enables us to embrace the new work of God? What is it that will keep us on the right path? We've talked in the negative a lot of ways, but what is it that will keep us doing the things of God? What is it that will keep us doing God first and then adding us to it rather than getting it backwards? Okay, and I think it's this. It's focusing on the mission. Okay, again, here at Gwinnett, we've got our mission statement. We are a loving family, living for God and serving our neighbors. We have to keep that first. Our mission has to be more important than our methods or any of the other things that we are doing, right? And again, we talked about this at length in the value series we had a few months back. One of the primary values that we have at this church is that we are going to be a people who adapt what we do, right? We're adapting right now to a whole new world as I'm preaching from my office instead of in person. We're adapting our small groups, our Bible classes, everything that we do. Why? Because our mission is so much more important than our methods. We are not married to any particular way of doing things, okay, but we are the bride of Christ and we are married to what he is doing in the world, and we have to keep on mission. If we are willing to live in the new world, if we are willing to follow Jesus, partake of the new wine and the new cloth and all these other images that he's saying, we will find life and we will find it to the full. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you. The Lord be gracious to you and give you peace.